Will you get us both in?
Yeah, and get us both in. Okay, so, yeah, so basically the question is, what do you think that I've brought to the Carers Centre?
I thought when you first came to the Carers Centre and you were on interview that you were young, a bit scatty and a bit off the wall, because that's what I remember from you with your work with young carers, and that was the first time I'd come into contact with you, although we hadn't spoken. So I didn't feel that I knew you, I just knew of you and your reputation. When you turned up for your interview, I was amazed to see this young professional lady, very confident, did a brilliant presentation, and I saw another side of you. And I thought, goodness me, this girl is going places and she's exactly what we want. And I think that came into a very strong light because the other candidates were slightly older, perhaps a bit more staid, and they'd been in their jobs in their various fields for a long period, all in charity work, and some of them were excellent candidates. But I think you stood out with your young enthusiasm, and that's something that I felt we were sadly lacking in the Carers Centre. I felt we needed a new breath of fresh air. And although normally in business, because I'm older, I would have thought I would have gone for the older woman. On this occasion, that was a great big plus for you as far as I was concerned.
Okay.
I also felt that you give now great direction, far better direction, and I do have experience of being a trustee on several other organisations and board of governors. You give tremendous leadership in terms that we always have proper agendas. We always have proper structured paperwork, and you are very, very inclusive of everybody. The idea of a big team, and it is a huge encompassing team, where we have members of staff, volunteers, trustees, everybody included on subcommittees, I think is very valuable. It gives such a great insight, makes for a very good debate, makes for sometimes different viewpoints, but that's good. I think that's very good for us as going forward. I feel with the Carers Centre we have changed. The Carers Centre has changed. In the 3 years in which I've been very actively involved, we've changed from being an older staid establishment, and I don't mean that in an unkind way because always carers have been at the forefront, but older in the approach of being able to reach out to these carers. Now we're so much more proactive. Now we've had, and it used to be care development workers in our doctors' surgeries. We've never done that before. We've never gone out and canvassed for our clientele. And under your leadership, I think that's exactly what you've done. And hopefully that's, you are overburdened, I feel, with your work and have been in the past. And that's why I feel that perhaps having David now full-time, it will free you up a bit to do perhaps the other things that you should be doing. I mean, to go for Picasso the next level, I think, you're either crazy or you need a med. But, the amount of work it was to get level 2.
Yeah.
But now I'm thinking, well, fine, we do need to go on to other things. We do need to have these kite marks. We need to be better than the competition. And because you are so driven, I think you pull us all along with you. A couple of times I think, ooh, yes, interesting. But because I'm in business, I think we tend to be slightly sometimes on the same side.
Yeah.
And therefore we both need holding back by the older, more staid members. And I think that needs to be, we need to be held on rein.
Yeah.
I think sometimes, and that's the great thing about having a balance of trustees.
Yeah. And what do you think I've learnt since I've been there?
I think the true professional women, when I've seen you at Princess Anne Trust conferences, when I've seen you addressing carers at the Carers Centre or various meetings, or taking hold of difficult meetings where we've been outside of the Carers Centre, I think the fact that you have got a lot of experience now to draw on, not just with, as I say, the young carers when you came in, but with all carers, I think you are so fully representative now. And I think that you are able to put your point of view very succinctly, very normally, and because you're naturally quietly spoken, your enthusiasm comes through, but it isn't overbearing. It's not like a pushy salesperson would be, but your sincerity comes through, and I think that's a lot to do with it, because it looks, and it is, honest and trustworthy, because you mean what you say. And I think that's been a fantastic benefit for us, particularly when you're going out there and you're having to tender to outside bodies. And I think you're a great ambassador for us.
And how about as a carer? Do you feel that things have changed as a carer for you with the care?
Certainly for me as a carer, every now and then the black clouds come, as they do with all carers. I mean, you jog along and just get on with your life as best you can, and then suddenly you have a dip. And I always feel personally that perhaps I may not need individual counselling, but there is always somebody there that I can just informally have a chat to, or I can ring up and say, can I please go to Amadown, or can I please have some additional support? And I feel it's always there. And it doesn't matter who I go to or who I speak to at the Carer Centre, I know that that's going to be dealt with professionally, confidentially, and very quickly. And so I'm extremely satisfied, and it's one of the reasons why I want to get so involved and continue to be so involved with the Carer Centre.
And do you think you've learnt anything as a trustee while you've been there? Well, you kind of started as a trustee, didn't you?
Yes,
last year?
I think I've learnt a lot as a carer. I've learnt patience, and because I've never been, I find a lot of the people that I say I'm working with, I'm not actually working with, but you know, they're my colleagues at the carers, they've all been in the caring centre and the charity sector for such a long time. I've always been in business, very, very different. I tend towards corporate business meetings and corporate business, very, very different dynamics, very different grouping. But I found I've learnt to become, it's not a question of humbling, but I've learnt and met some truly inspirational people. And I feel when I'm on a down, it certainly helps. It certainly helps, particularly when I see a parent carer, because that to me is the most horrendous job that any parent could ever have in the world. And the empathy is there, and therefore I feel I want to give that extra bit. I want to recruit more carers. I want us to be successful in the best possible way. And I think because you're a carer yourself, that the empathy is naturally there. So that when one of us has a problem, it's not a question of, oh, I can't go and see Sonia, she's the chief exec. Because invariably, when I've been into the Carers Centre, unless you've got somebody in with you, your door's open. And I think the open door policy is absolutely fantastic. And I know, having spoken to some of the staff today, over an issue that I thought perhaps wasn't going to be successful, the fact that you're so approachable with the staff, even though I think perhaps in the beginning there were a few doubting Thomases, new broom sweeps clean, and I think there's always the fear of the unknown when you have somebody new, particularly at the top, and it's tough at the top and it's lonely. I think that those fears have been unfounded, and generally because you are so approachable, you know, I think, well, that's great. Now, it sounds like you're a paragon of virtue, and I think, well, no, she isn't a paragon of virtue. And, you know, she still has her fun, and we still are able to work through things. And, you know, I've spoken to other trustees, particularly Bunny, the treasurer, but they're all finding the same thing. If we have an individual problem and we come to you, not necessarily that you'll solve it, but you're prepared to listen, and in listening, we are perhaps able to solve that problem ourselves. And I think that's something that I've never been great at, because I've run my business in almost an autocratic way, because that's just the way it is sometimes. I have learnt to listen. I've learnt to listen far more, and I've learnt not only to listen but to hear. When we went to the trustees meeting at the M Shed in Bristol, the other trustees on some of the charities, I was absolutely appalled at some of the things that they were telling me. Beyond my comprehension, beyond my understanding of the other. And I thought, it's a tremendous learning circle, and it just goes to show that there is even in these depressed and darkened days, so much good out there in the world. And I think in the charity sector we are able to tap into that. And certainly, you know, you have been a fantastic leader as far as funding's gone. And I think our funding, looking at the other three charities on which I'm a governor or a trustee, I look at the Carer Centre and it certainly is a beacon. It's certainly a leading light in the darkness compared to the funding that is falling off and the genuine fears that the other people have, the other people that are on contract.
Yeah.
And that is always a worry when you're on a contract.
Yeah.
How do I pay the mortgage after the end of the financial year? That's something I've never faced in business.
No.
Yes, we're only as good as last month's sales figures, but to a certain extent you control it more. In a charity sector, sometimes that is beyond your control and it's worrying. But I think the general foresight and the general feeling that we will move forward and we will be the best in our field, which is something you are very much good at beating that drum. I think that's catching. It's very contagious, and certainly for the new trustees, and not only have you had some new staff to deal with, you've had, you know, 5 new trustees.
Yeah, true.
That's more than half, and that, you know, really is quite a number. And we all have brought something different and something new. And I think you've had to gel not only your own work team, but you've had to gel your trustee team.
Yeah.
And also to a certain extent, I met some new volunteers today.
Yeah.
So it's very multifaceted, this job, far more than I thought. It was a little hick charity somewhere in the deepest, darkest Radstock, which I didn't even know existed, I'm ashamed to say. I had no idea where it was.
Yeah.
But it isn't. It's big, and it's getting bigger, and we're encompassing more and more carers, which at the end of the day is what we're all about.
Yeah, yeah. Can I just ask you a bit about your involvement stuff that you've done, like up at the university, and because you do quite a lot of work in terms of trying to improve services for carers.
Yes.
And just say kind of what you've learned from that, and has the Carer Centre helped you in that, and you know, how is there anything we can do to improve our work there?
Well, certainly 3 years ago, I remember the first time I went up with second year sociology students with Helen, who's no longer at the Carer Centre. And that was very, very different, the introduction to social students at that time. It was very much based on a PowerPoint introduction from Helen, who was leading from the Carer Centre. And then I think on the first occasion there were just 2 of us. 2 carers giving their story to the students, sociology or social work students. Not that it wasn't powerful, it was powerful and it was well done. But latterly, we've done away with the PowerPoints. We've had one of the carers themselves leading the session, which was absolutely brilliant. And he did Ian Dagger did an absolutely wonderful job. I can't take that. And also, Royal United Hospital, who did a very similar thing with the staff there. When we went to Western and when we went to the lecture theatre in the Royal United. But the sociology students particularly, because they are young and because some of them have, you know, they are told we have an assessment and therefore they've got a predetermined idea, right, you do your assessment, you do this, you do that, you have all these hoops to jump, and life isn't like that. No. And unfortunately, because you've had an assessment, it doesn't necessarily mean that anything's going to come of that. My own experience was horrendous. We got to phase 3 because I was excluded financially. My social worker that was with me at the time said, well, I'm sorry, Rosie, I don't think we can go any farther. There's nothing I can do for you. At which point I thought, well, let's conclude the meeting. We're wasting each other's time. Now, we could have gone on and I should have been signposted, but that is exactly what the Carer Centre is doing now. Yeah. And that's what we're making far more aware. And I've recently done one jointly to older social students. And that's been with Neil. And that was a lot better. Neil, again, that was on the legalities. Yeah. So it was we're coming from a slightly different standpoint. And he did have a PowerPoint presentation, but by necessity. Because, as I know in my business, you can't change statutes. No. Statutes are there, and there is a certain amount that, as a student, as somebody studying anything, you have to learn. Yeah. You have to know it. It's not a question of opinion or whether or not you like the system or your interpretation. You have to know a statute. Yeah. You have to know what is in. any particular Act of Parliament, because that is an immovable force. But I think the social work students, the earlier ones in the second year, when you have a group sat there, and I've been there with up to 6 carers, and I think that is absolutely paramount. We had all different carers. We had Liz, and so we had parent carers. We had she's a daughter looking after her parents. We had a husband and wife. I'm a wife with a husband, and I think the more carers that we get involved, and I know we've had very many courses now at the Carer Centre to empower carers to become spokespeople. I suppose it's a bit different for me because my background has been slightly different, so I'm not frightened of it. But many carers, you can see the confidence grow, and because they have a different perspective and come from a different angle, it makes all our voices so much more valuable and so much more poignant to the general public. And I think the social students have really been enlightened and empowered by listening to our individual stories. And so I think that it's a very, very valid part of our work. And the closer we can forge our links with the younger people, I mean, you're very close to them in age. And being an adult student, again, I think, yes, that there are Masters and PhD students up there, and they're all across the board. But you look at it and you think, it's fantastic, because they learn from us and we learn from them. What can these social workers do for us? What is it reasonable for us to expect as carers from them? Now, yes, they may not be able to wave a magic wand, and nobody really expects them to in reality, and they may not be able to help us financially or whatever it is we're going for. But if they can signpost us to places like the Carer Centre, that in itself opens up such, not just a wealth of information, but the nurturing and the caring and the empathy from other carers, because we do form our own groups. I remember early on at the Carer Centre, I went on a first aid course, and there were 6 of 7 of us, and we were sometimes, the lady leading, Judith, was absolutely brilliant, really fantastic. And there you are trying to make this model, pump in some air, and you're doing Nelly the elephant pack to try, and I mean, absolute sweat's pouring off you still can't make this thing blow up. But you're having so much fun. And so for that hour or hour and a half, you can forget the grind, the daily life that some of these people have. And I mean, I'm fortunate to be able to go back to work, but some people are with it 24/7. And I just can't imagine how horrendous that would be. And I know that if that was my caring role, I truly would not be able to do it. So I think I am very much one of the fortunate ones. And because of that, I want to give my little bit back to the charities that perhaps Den and I come into contact with now. And whereas before, yes, we used to do the black tie events for charities and spend money at the roulette tables or whatever, but this is a very much more hands-on type of helping than I've ever been involved with before. And I have got such a lot out of it, so much more, and all my staff in the office. The fact that they all volunteer an hour here, or they're asked which hour they want to stand in a windy marketplace, and but I mean, it's good, and they've got quite caught up in it, and they now know, so that when we have a carer sign in the window and a little old lady comes in, they say, oh, this is the number that you need, but Rose is not here at the moment, but they've got one of my carers' cards in the front desk, so it works quite well. So although we haven't quite got a bath office yet, I think we're working on it. We've got
a part-time one here. No, that's great.
Oh, thanks, Rosie. Is that it?
Yeah, it's lovely. Thank you.